Let me just make sure this is streaming. Great. So I have been feeling some holiday stress and some pandemic stress lately. So I thought that the first thing we could do before I start talking about science versus pseudoscience is to take a few mindful breaths together. So go ahead and roll your shoulders back. You can close your eyes if you want and just sit up straight and rest your hands lightly somewhere and take a couple deep breaths. Okay, awesome. So thanks for joining in live, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the recording later on. I love comments, questions, likes. It's good to know who's watching, and if you like these videos, then it gives me a good idea of who's watching. So this one is a topic that I have always covered in my Give Up Sugar for Good level 2 course. So some of you who may be tuning in who have done that, and I know there's quite a few of you who have done that course. I always start off that level 2 course with an introduction to science versus pseudoscience, because there's so many health claims on the internet that it's really tough to know which ones are real, which ones are fake. It was really tough for me to know that at first too. And so I had written that pseudoscience is a noun, and it's a collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on the scientific method. And it's really tricky to understand the difference between the two. So that's why I wanted to talk about that briefly today. I think I wanted to talk first. I wanted to share kind of first my journey, and because I have not always been someone who is able to discern science from pseudoscience very well. I think that I subscribed to a lot of beliefs mistakenly that I thought were helpful and potentially were due to the placebo effect, and that it took a lot of reprogramming my brain to realize where the limiting factors were and why it's important to discern the difference between real science and something that looks like science. And so to start with, I will just say that when I was, I think in middle school, my guess would be maybe 8th or 9th grade, maybe 10th grade. I had, it may be kind of gross to some of you, but I'm going to bring up a medical weird body thing that I had, which is that I had plantar warts. So these are very, very, very painful warts on the bottom of my feet. And I can remember they were so painful. I could barely walk. And we went to the doctor, which was always stressful in my family because it seemed like whatever kind of insurance we had, like we still had maybe like a deductible. So every time we went to the doctor, it was like stressed out my parents because they would have to pay some sort of visit fee or wasn't covered until that deductible was met. So I can remember that being already stressful of like, oh shoot, I need to go to the doctor. Which is such a bummer in our society, and it leads to a mistrust of the medical institutions, especially like when there's a lack of access to like easy science-based care, then we start to come up with all sorts of home remedies to help make up for that lack. So I just want to kind of say there's point number one as to why many of us may lean towards home remedies that that might not be the most helpful. Especially in the United States. And I went to the doctor and they gave me some paste to put on my feet that that burned, the sensation was burning. So it was painful. Like I was already in pain. And then I put this paste on and it was painful, and they didn't go away, and it didn't seem to work. And I was still in a lot of pain. And then I had a relative say, oh, I used to get those, and I used colloidal silver and pine resin salve. Here, I still have some. Here you go. And I used that, and it worked, and they went away. So that was the seed that was planted in me, that I didn't want to trust doctors. They seemed to not have my best interest at heart, and they seemed to not really care how I was doing or what I needed. And they also gave me this thing that didn't work. So what do they know? They seem to not know anything. So I think that just about every person has a story like that. Because when I share that story of what happened to me, everyone can think of something similar that happened to them in that way. That thought, gosh, maybe the medical system is not that trustworthy. I also was thinking of the example of pharmaceuticals. A lot of people distrust pharmaceutical companies and doctors due to the opioid epidemic, which is super tragic. And that's a real problem that existed, where certain specific pharmaceutical companies were spreading misinformation in order to increase their sales. And certain specific doctors, not all of them, were overprescribing opioid medications. And so then as a culture, or if you're a person who either had an opioid misuse disorder or knew someone who did, and it impacted your family in a significant way, then all of a sudden we're taking something that's very real and painful and applying it to the whole medical profession. Because there was some corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and in the medical industry, therefore, I don't trust any doctors or any science. Therefore, science is not real. So these are some of the pathways whereby we may find ourselves seeking out alternative remedies and alternative realities. And so it wasn't until I read this book, Trick or Treatment, and I think I have talked about this one before on here, The Undeniable Facts About Alternative Medicine, that I started to realize why science is important. And the example that they give, well, actually they give quite a few, but I feel like the classic example is bloodletting. Bloodletting is something that worked to cure illnesses, and then instead they were killing a lot of people. And of course, now we know that bloodletting is not the thing, that it's barbaric. But through trial and error, we had to discover through the scientific method of testing, let's try some patients with bloodletting and some patients with this other treatment that actually, that we don't know which one works and which one doesn't, and see who has the best, see who dies and who lives. And so, even though that seems very simple and basic as an idea, like, well, of course, that's how science works. It really was like quite a while. I think I read this book in my late 20s before it really hit me of why it's so important to pay attention to scientific studies that are credible and done well to decide which treatments to adopt, whether that be what I take for a headache, or what kind of treatment I may want to get for something more serious. And so they talk at length in this book about scurvy, because it's a really clear example that was easy for them to study even before the scientific method became widely adopted in our society, is that sailors aboard ships were dying. And they didn't know why. And so they could try out different treatments sort of accidentally on different ships, where it's like really easy to isolate the people getting the different treatments, because maybe one ship they were like, oh, maybe if they drink more beer, and the other maybe they need to eat more meat. Make sure that they have lemons and oranges. And then everyone died except for the ship that got lemons and oranges, which they realized that, of course, it wasn't called scurvy at the time until they developed this treatment, because they tried a whole bunch of different things, and it was the lemons that worked. And so therefore, all sailors then got lemons. And I think that it's really important to come back to this example. It's an oversimplification, but it's like, when it comes to getting a treatment, do you want to drink beer for scurvy, or do you want to have the thing that works, the lemons, right? And so oftentimes we can get kind of tricked into thinking that what we're receiving is a cure because the marketing and the salesmanship is really good. And then it turns out that the science just isn't there. So I wanted to, let me see. Yeah, okay. So I want to cover still health gurus and health claims. How to stay away from snake oil salesmen, and then I'll talk about kind of nurturance, and then I want to give you a couple of resources to help you do the research to decide if a treatment is right for you. So one thing that this book helped me understand that I hadn't understood before was that the vitamin industry is not regulated by the FDA. And you'll see that if you buy a vitamin at the store that it says these health claims have not been endorsed or evaluated by the FDA. And this was because this industry has a lot of money. And I believe they lobbied to make sure that vitamins were seen as separate from a food, I guess, so that they couldn't be regulated in the same way. So, it's super important when you're looking like at a supplement section to really keep that in mind, because it's possible that you may be buying a treatment that doesn't actually work, but that is on the shelf anyway, which it's so interesting to me, because the logic might be, well, it's on the shelf and the health claim is on there. Doesn't this company have my best interest at heart, or don't you think people would catch on if it doesn't work? And so there's probably a couple things at play there. One thing might be that it may be something where in a study it had a partial effect, and that now they're saying that this could be applied to something larger. Like, for example, turmeric, this is being claimed as having anti-inflammatory properties. So it could be that in some study, and I don't know where the origins of this claim come from, that in some study of rats at a super, super, super high dose, some rats had a better outcome with less inflammation than others, but that we would need to actually consume like so much turmeric in order to have that same effect on us. But then because that study did happen, and because this company wants to make money on this product, and maybe also a little bit of wishful thinking, like, oh, it probably works, then all of a sudden this is where like pseudoscience comes in. So this is the pseudo part. It sounds like science. It sounds science-y. There's like a thread of truth. And there was this one study in rats where it really worked. And therefore, we're going to make this other really large health claim that it could help you with all sorts of things. And it's interesting because a lot of supplements will make weird, vague health claims like, it's great for detoxification, for inflammation. It's great for clear skin, or like something that is really hard to actually measure and prove. Detox is a huge one that is a really interesting vague health claim that we actually don't really need help detoxing because we have kidneys and a liver. And so these are marketing terms that were created in order to sell this product. So, these are some terms to be skeptical of. I graduated last year with my master's degree in public health, and I realized that not everyone is able to go get a public health degree and spend hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours analyzing scientific studies to be able to discern a health claim from actual medicine that works. And but we can all be aware of some of these like pop marketing terms, like detox, or maybe like digestive health benefits or something, just, like a vague term. But in public health, what we try and do is we actually measure an outcome. So we'll actually say like, we took a population of patients like irritable bowel syndrome, for example, and then we know the exact symptoms of what irritable bowel syndrome is. I actually don't think I know exactly what those symptoms are. Let me look it up. Cramping, abdominal pain, bloating, gas, and diarrhea. So in a public health study, they might ask people to report how often they're getting those specific symptoms. Maybe it's like a journal that they're reporting in and writing down when they have those symptoms. Or maybe, I'm trying to think if any of these things are like objectively measurable. Things that are objectively measurable tend to be things like your stress level, or I think you could actually just measure. The problem becomes when people have to self-report, so that there's always a greater margin of error when people have to say like, oh, I had cramping 3 times this week. But these are things that could be measured, especially if someone was keeping track in some sort of journal. And then you'd apply the treatment. So maybe one treatment would be turmeric, and one treatment would be don't eat any gluten, and the other treatment would be increasing your water intake. And then you would then measure these symptoms again and see if any of them were different or if they were the same compared to a control group that got no treatment. And so you can't just say like it's great for inflammation. You have to actually be looking at a specific health outcome with specific symptoms and to see whether this treatment performed better than nothing at all in actually reducing these specific measurable symptoms. So a health claim would be something like, compared to a control group, diarrhea was reduced by using this medication in 60% of the patients who tried it. So that's something that is more specific, that can help you start to discern, is this a general and potentially bogus health claim where they're trying to sell me a health product in order to get a profit? Or was this studied in a credible way? And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, what's credible and what's not. And what was the very, very specific measured outcome that was better than getting nothing? And so, I kind of want to touch on what kind of health gurus or snake oil salesmen will try to do, is to say something sciencey that sounds like it was studied, or it sounds like it has an effect on something specific. But when you look under that and you really actually see, well, was this really studied, and who did this study, and what did it say, and was it against a control group, and was the study done well, and was it published in a reputable journal? Is that oftentimes you'll find that none of these things happened. And unfortunately, isn't very well regulated in the United States, for other countries. I think this is an especially prominent thing in US society, just because of our capitalist culture here and just kind of our obsession with trying to make the most money possible. And so especially with so much information on online now and how easy it is to put information out there, I especially saw this when I got my health coaching certification in 2014 and started to be a health coach, is that people often wanted to hear the exact right answer. They wanted to know, how many cups of kale do I need to eat in order to feel better? And I started to notice that people were really looking for that exact prescription and that exact right answer. And there's plenty of people on the internet who are willing to provide that, and they'll provide it for a fee. Order my magical cure, my magical product, and you'll feel better. And there's something very appealing about that to us, about having that right answer. And I definitely fell for that a number of times. I had a lot of digestive issues in my 20s that was related to emotional health, and was often just searching for the right pill that I could take that would help alleviate my symptoms. And that's where I kind of want to get into around emotional health and our bodies. And that can often get exploited by some pseudoscientific remedies. Because for example, and I was kind of looking this up, and this is one great resource, is that you can go to Google Scholar. And so it's just scholar.google.com, and you can find published studies. These are studies published by academics in reputable journals. And I just kind of I searched in there bedside manner for physicians and patient outcomes. And I can find a number of studies that measured patient outcomes, as well as whether the patients perceived the doctor as being friendly and attentive, and whether or not that improved their outcome. And I'd love to a meta-analysis. Which is where they look at, someone reviews all the studies and makes some studies, but I didn't do it before I went live, but I was able to just kind of quickly see that like patient satisfaction increases, patients' reviews of their treatment is more favorable, and all of these things can then lead to better health, because there is a link between emotional. So this is something that's been scientifically real, that if you perceive your physician as being friendlier and that they actually care about you, that your outcome or your perceived outcome can be better, improved. And so when it comes to some treatments out there, that, which is real science, can be exploited by practitioners selling, just about anything. Something that I tend to be skeptical of is like Reiki therapy. And so someone might go to a Reiki therapist, and the Reiki therapist pays attention to them and is nurturing and genuinely cares. And so you may leave feeling genuinely better. And so oftentimes this will be a rationalization for a pseudoscientific treatment, is that, yeah, but I actually do feel better. And it is true that feeling like someone cares about you and your health can improve your health outcomes. And so it gets to be, and they do talk about that in this one. And there's another great book called Do You Believe in Magic that does a great job of covering some of the same topics. That it becomes an ethical problem, because if you were to study Reiki or other pseudoscientific therapies like this that are based on the actual science of nurturance, is that if you were to compare Reiki therapy for a specific health outcome, let's say cancer, compared to a treatment that, like chemotherapy, would be the treatment that is needed. And that actually works, and that Reiki would not cure cancer, and it does not, and it has not been proven to cure cancer, despite probably you could probably Google this and find some health gurus on the internet that are claiming that Reiki can cure cancer. And they especially have a great market with desperate parents. That's if parents have a child that they just really feel like they're at their wit's end and nothing else has worked, then that's when snake oil salespeople can really make a lot of money. And there's a lot of case studies and examples of that in this book. So when you're looking at a specific health outcome, like cancer or like IBS or like depression, and you compare the treatment that supposedly it works, my example here is Reiki, and another example and a control, you have to go with the treatment that actually has measurable results for specific symptoms and that works better than nothing. And so the problem becomes when you say, well, yeah, but I feel better. What's the problem? Is that often very expensive, and it becomes an ethical problem, not for those of us who have the extra $100 or $200 to spend, no problem. We earn a great living wage. And I mean, for me, I'm able to visit an out-of-network therapist every other week and pay her the $115, no problem, no sweat. Impact me at all. But for a lot of people, especially those that may be more susceptible to health claims without being able to have that knowledge to be critical and to have that discernment, they may fall for this marketing and this messaging without being able to be skeptical. And for them, $100 a week or every other week is a lot of money and puts stress on their household. So just be sure to check your privilege when saying, yeah, but it's not a big deal. If I feel better, then it's fine, because not all of us have the privilege to just spend hundreds of dollars on these treatments. And my favorite example of a group that really touts these expensive treatments that seem to be blind to Goop. And my favorite one to make fun of is the vaginal yoni steaming, where you can go to a retreat and spend $500 to steam your vagina, and just all the privilege that's involved there, because this is not a science evidence-based practice. And I don't know, for me, it's sort of like, wouldn't you want to share your money before trying a treatment like this, where there's other people out there who can't even put food on the table, and now we're doing this really expensive, ridiculous treatment. So that's kind of my go-to example in my mind of like, maybe you feel better, but isn't there some other better way that we could be spending our money as people with privilege and extra money? And maybe that's just a little tangent. But once you get into these circles about health gurus making health claims, you'll see that there's a lot of people complaining about Gwyneth Paltrow. So in addition, I kind of wanted to circle back, if you're hearing these health claims and you're saying, what does it matter if it's science or not? I feel better, right? So there's the ethical issue around money and privilege. And then there's also just this kind of thing of the placebo effect is real. So if you think that something works, that's real. An ethical issue around some of these treatments needing for people to not be skeptical of them. So people need to be fooled into thinking it works in order for it to work. And that creates an ethical dilemma, because you're not telling people the truth, which is that this is the placebo effect. And instead you're saying, no, there really are meridians in your body with blocked chi. And that's what's creating this healing. Like, in order for the placebo effect to work, then you have to actually deceive people as to the reason why your treatment is working. So it becomes an ethical dilemma. So I wanted to point you in the direction of a couple resources here. I'm going to wrap up. One is science-based medicine, and I'm going to drop that link in. And then science-based medicine was founded by Steven Novella, and he also has a great podcast called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. So it's the same folks that do both. And this is a great podcast and a great website for looking at different health claims and starting to develop a more skeptical mind and to understand the nuance of science versus pseudoscience when it comes to health, and why it matters. One thing that they do that I really love, because it's such a slippery slope that even people who are experts in the science of health can still fall prey to pseudoscientific claims, is that I've heard them play a game on the podcast where they'll have a couple of real health claims and a pseudoscientific health claim, and all of the hosts on the show have to try and guess which one is science and which one's pseudoscience, and it's super fun. And they will often be wrong. It's really hard to tell for all of us. They've had stories of like people who used to be like naturopaths who woke up and realized that what they were doing was wrong, and they have come and shared their story. So I highly recommend starting to listen to the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and just have an open mind about the science of health. And I think that it's just really nice to sort of knows what to look for when we're trying to evaluate health claims. And then with science-based medicine, you can actually search different terms like Reiki or acupuncture or cryotherapy or cupping, these different types of weird, expensive treatments, and just see what some of these experts have to say, because they've already done the analysis. And I love it. You know, if I hear about a new thing, I will go look on there to see what these people who have been really trained to evaluate health claims say. Another thing that's great, like I already mentioned, is Google Scholar. But, you know, it can be really hard for us to try and evaluate studies just on our own. Like, we don't know, like, how valid is this? Who did this? What journal is this? What am I reading? I don't understand. So a great resource is the Cochrane Review. And this is a group that that looks at all of the research available and puts together reviews of different treatments based on all of the research in ways that are easier to read. So I'm going to put that link in there too. It's a great resource to search and evaluate different health claims to see what's valid and what's not, what actually has research and studies behind it and what doesn't. So I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that I am going to realize I missed because it's such a dense topic. You know, when I do this for the Give Up Sugar for Good program, we spend a whole week on it. So thanks for letting me kind of stumble through, and you know, if I come up with some other things that I want to address, maybe I can do a part 2. But feel free to send me your messages or leave your comments. And I'll be curious to having a discussion about this with you all. Thanks for watching.